Welcome back. A quick look at the weather around Canada makes me feel a little bit better about how it's cold here, but not really. So, at any rate, because I'm sure there's people across Canada like, you kidding me? It's minus 25. Yeah, I just looked. Yeah, it's really cold back there. It sucks. Um, it's one of those things that when it's cold here and we've got the Arctic outflows, I'm like, man, it's got to be really cold across the rest of Canada. Usually it is. So Vancouver news to start off today. Atu Ratu, and I've got to figure that out now that he's a Canuck, right? He's been called up. Now, the interesting thing with Ratu is that he had 1 point in 8 games in Abbotsford. Wasn't clicking in Abbotsford and was kind of frustrated with that. They've moved Di Giuseppe back down to the AHL. That's good for Abbotsford. That's going to help their attack. Di Giuseppe playing well in Abbotsford this year. For Ratu, I think it's a matter of they want Tocchet to get a look at him, see where he fits in the lineup. I think this is good. This is something a team should be doing when they're outside of the playoff picture. Bring the kids up, like Podkolzin. They've been giving him a good look the last few games. I like it. And Brisebois has been recalled as well. So we'll see how things go for Vancouver from here. But calling up Ratu, good. Well, we'll see how things work with him and where he fits into the lineup and what the picture is for him. With Tocchet as the coach. Brock Besser's agent being reported in The Athletic today. Michael Russo and Joe Smith with a nice article on the Minnesota Wild and them talking to Brock Besser's agent, Ben Hankinson, about trying to find a fit. Now, the problem is Minnesota's cap. We've talked a lot about Minnesota's dead cap money. That is going to make it really tough for them to add. So for Brock Besser to go to Minnesota, Vancouver's probably going to have to retain a lot. Considering there's a couple more years left in Brock Besser's contract past this season, getting the Canucks to eat that amount of money, it's not going to be an easy sell. So for Besser, he'd love to go to Minnesota. I think he'd fit in. I know he's underachieved in Vancouver this year, but I also know the hands are there. I remember when he came up his first year in the National Hockey League, like he was one of the best shooters I've seen in a Vancouver jersey. He's not there now. And I'm not trying to make the argument he's not there now, but the talent's there. So for Besser, if he can find a way to go to Minnesota, and it may involve Vancouver taking money back. The Dumba rumors, I don't think there's anything to them. And I don't know that Vancouver would be interested in Dumba, a pending UFA right now. But we'll see. We'll see what might be available. We'll come back to Minnesota in a bit here, because there might be a mutually beneficial solution to the problem. If Minnesota can make the money work. And that's really going to be the question mark, because Bill Guerin wants to make sure this team stays competitive throughout. You don't want to waste years with Kaprizov being in his prime and playing really, really well. And adding Besser to the top 6 could be huge. Ben Hankinson saying, you throw him with Boldy. Yeah, no argument there. That could absolutely work. And again, playing in his home environment in Minnesota, I think he would excel. I do. I think his numbers would turn around. I still think Besser can be a 30-goal scorer in the National Hockey League. Toronto news, sad news that came out shortly after I published my last video in the morning, news related, and that is that Jake Muzzin is finished for the season. We knew this was coming anyways. It's cervical spine injury. This could end up being career-ending. So for Jake Muzzin, all the best to him in his recovery. A player's health is always more important than a player being on the ice and getting out there with the team and playing through it. So all the best to Muzzin on that. I don't know what this does to the picture for this team at the deadline. I don't think it does much, because I think they already knew he wasn't coming back for the season. I think they're just making it official today. They've also waived Joey Anderson, so Anderson's on his way back to the minors. I don't think anybody claims Anderson. His play didn't really, I think, warrant a lot of interest from other teams that suddenly say, hey, Anderson's available. Chris Tierney's been waived by Florida. Florida also apparently are going to demote Denisenko with the idea that if you waive Tierney and he clears or gets claimed and you demote Denisenko, they can then activate Duclair. There's been a lot of talk about Florida wanting to activate Anthony Duclair for about a week. I've been hearing this talk. And so, yeah, Duclair being back in the lineup could be huge. Florida needs something. There's something that's not working with Florida, something that's not clicking, and getting Tierney back in the lineup could be huge. Also, Kirkland being waived by Anaheim, and kudos to the internet for being undefeated. All of the Costco jokes underneath Kirkland's name, because it was something that I thought right away. The first time that I saw him in an Anaheim game, I couldn't get that out of my mind. So he's the Kirkland version of a hockey player. Like it's in my brain. It's right there, and so that's that. But yeah, Kirkland on waivers, and I don't think any of these guys get picked. I think they all clear, and I think they all end up in the American Hockey League. But we're getting close to the deadline, and with all the injuries around the NHL, you just never know who may or may not get claimed. So coming back to Minnesota, Kalen Addison. So basically, the idea is this: Minnesota's scratching him on the idea that he plays scared. Now, what that tells me is he's not going into the corners. He's not fighting for the pucks. I have complained about players that play this way. It can be very frustrating because the way it looks is that a guy goes in against the boards, and somebody comes in for a hit, and they'll back off, and they'll turn the puck over because they don't want to take that hit, or they're playing. And again, this is where playing scared comes in. Now, Addison disagrees. Addison says, "No, I'm not playing scared. I'm playing as hard as I can." But he's been a healthy scratch for 3 straight games. So maybe Addison ends up being on the block. Addison's a pretty good point-producing defenseman, and he's young. And in the event that Minnesota says, you know what, we have faith in Dean Evason, if he's soured on Addison, who's still technically a rookie, we can move him at the deadline and maybe pick somebody up. So I don't know that Addison's on his way out of town. I'm not saying that he is, but it is interesting that this is the argument that's out there, and it's this close to the trade deadline. So we'll see. But let me know if you guys think Addison sticks around with Minnesota or what ends up happening there. Jake Sanderson, good news for Ottawa fans, practicing today in a non-contact jersey. Just glad to see him out there. Also good news, it's been confirmed Talbot will play on the weekend. So these are good things for Ottawa. We'll see whether or not they can string together some victories, because it really does look like in both the West and the East, those wildcard spots are wide open right now. So we'll see if Ottawa can really and truly join that wild card race, or if they're going to continue to fade here and there, on and off. It feels like with Florida, Buffalo, and Ottawa, they shoot themselves in the foot more often than they should. And yeah, that's been the storyline, I think, with these 3 teams. They're not that far out. And really, the fact that Ottawa's in the playoff picture in late February, yeah, it's not what people envisioned for Ottawa, but it's still progress over where they've been the last few years. Good news for Carolina, for Raleigh. The Stadium Series game was the most watched Stadium Series game since 2019, when it was Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So the ratings much higher than last year, somewhat higher than 2 years ago. And yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to see if those ratings drop during the game, because it was kind of a lopsided game. But it's nice to see strong ratings, 1.1 million people in the U.S. watching it. And while on the Canadian side of the fence, viewership numbers don't seem to be as important, because in Canada we just love our hockey. It is nice to see on the American side of the border a game getting 1.1 million. Now, if the NHL marketed it really, really well in advance and made it the only game that's on during that time, I think the ratings would be even higher. Make it feel like it's something really, really important that nothing else can distract you, and I think more people would watch. But at any rate, still the highest rating since 2019. Kudos to them for that. So St. Louis, a team that has not looked like the Blues lately. But they're singing the blues, certainly. The good news for them is they're going to be getting healthier tomorrow night. It looks like both Saad and Buchnevich are going to return to the lineup against the Vancouver Canucks. Again, as a Canuck fan, I want to see the Canucks play well and then lose the game, because they need I think they need a top 5 draft pick this year. Just as a reward for the fans for what's been a miserable season. At least a top... And notice I'm not saying the number 1 pick, because they're not winning the draft lottery, but a top 5 pick would be nice. But yeah, so we'll see with Saad and Buchnevich back in the lineup how much that helps St. Louis. I think it definitely will help them. The Blues have been really undermanned. We're to the point where I'll hear a name during the broadcast and be like, he's playing for the Blues right now? Wow, there's a lot of guys out, and a lot between trades and injuries. It's really thinned out that lineup. There was a trade made today. Normally I would lead with the trade, but this is a trade that's made so that Vegas has some cap flexibility next year. So talking about how Vegas is being attached all of a sudden as a potential destination for players, even though they don't have any cap space now and going forward, well, they've made some cap space. They've traded Shea Weber's contract to the Arizona Coyotes. He joins guys like Marian Hossa, Pavel Datsyuk, well-known Coyotes. and others. Chris Pronger too, right? So yeah, there's been a lot of really well-known Coyotes. Weber will join them with a 2023 fifth-round pick. So that's doable if you're Vegas. And they acquire Dyson Mayo, who's been immediately assigned to Henderson. Now, Mayo's an interesting pickup in that he fell out of favor in Arizona, a team that does have better defensive depth than you might think. The Arizona Coyotes might be a team that aren't very good and are going to end up towards the bottom of the standings, but their blue line's got some decent depth there. So Mayo, I think, is a smart pickup by Vegas. I thought he was good last year, not as good this year. That's how he ends up in the minors. That's how he ends up not in the Arizona Coyotes lineup. But with the right team and maybe a change of scenery could help, I think Mayo can still be a top 6 defenseman in the NHL. So I think he was hurt by the fact that Mosier's turned out to be a beast for the Coyotes. Stature's been pretty good as well. And just in general, the Coyotes blue line, like I said, as maligned as it might be because the Arizona Coyotes, the reality is that there is some depth there and it bumps Mayo out. So we'll see whether or not Vegas ends up calling him up, take a look at him, or if he just plays the rest of the season in Henderson. Maybe that's what he needs. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through, you just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.